Hello, my second grade friends. We are back with the tale of Despereaux. Today we're going to be talking about rereading. Do you know what rereading means? Think to yourself, what does rereading mean? Yeah, so rereading means going back and reading something that you just read. We do this as good readers to make sure that we understand the story. So if there's a part that we think, I'm kind of confused about this, we'll go back and reread it slowly so that we can make sure that we're understanding what's happening in the story before moving on. Good readers don't just pick up the book right where they left off and just read as many chapters as they can and then close the book, right? We pick up the book, think, what happened in the story where I left off, what was going on, and then they start reading. And while they're reading, they stop and they pause and they think to themselves, do I understand what's going on in the story? And if the answer is no, then they go back a few pages and reread what they read to make sure, oh, that's right, okay, that's what's going on. These are the characters that are talking, this is where they are, the setting, and they go through and think about the things that happen in the story so that they understand. So, like good readers, before we start reading today, we're going to think, what had just happened in the story when we left off? Think to yourself, what had just happened? Where did we leave off? Right, so we met a new character. Her name is Reread, but we call her Mig. And she is now a servant girl at the castle that Princess P lives in. Let's go back a few pages. Let's see. Oh, she went down to the dungeon to feed Gregory the jailer, and that's where she met Roscoe the rat. Let's see. And Roscoe said that he had a plan to make Mig a princess, is where we left off. And let's see, the last paragraph that we left off on was that there was small mouse-like noises in the napkin that Mig was holding on the tray. So, I wonder who that could be. So we're going to pick up where we left off, and we're going to stop when we get confused when there's a part that we're not sure about, and we're going to go back and reread to make sure that we got it before we move on, okay? Awesome. Book the 4th, Recalled to the Light. Chapter 34. Reader, you did not forget about our small mouse, did you? Back to the light. That was what Gregory whispered to him when he wrapped Despereaux in his napkin and placed him on the tray. And then Mig, after her conversation with Roscoe, carried the tray into the kitchen, and when she saw Cook, she shouted, "It's me, Reread, back from the deep downs." "Oh, lovely," said Cook, "and ain't we all relieved?" Mig put the tray on the counter. Here, said Cook. Your duties ain't done. You must clear it." "How's that?" shouted Mig. "You must clear the tray," shouted Cook. She reached over and took hold of the napkin and gave it a good shake, and Despereaux tumbled out of the napkin and landed right directly, plop, in a measuring cup full of oil. "Ah!" said Cook. "A mouse in my kitchen, in my cooking oil, in my measuring cup. You, Mig, kill him directly." Mig bent her head down and looked at the mouse, slowly sinking to the bottom of the glass cup. "Poor little micey," she said, and she stuck her hand into the oil and pulled him out by its tail. Despereaux, gasping and coughing and blinking at the bright light, could have wept with joy at his rescue. But he was not given time to cry. "Kill him!" shouted Cook. "Gore!" said Mig. "All right." Holding Despereaux by the tail, she went to get the kitchen knife, but the mouse tail, covered in oil, was slick and difficult to hold on to. And Mig, in reaching for the knife, loosened her grip and Despereaux fell to the floor. Mig looked down at the little bundle of brown fur. "Gore," she said, "that killed him for sure." "Kill him even if he's already dead," shouted Cook. That's my philosophy with mice. If they're alive, kill 'em. If they're dead, kill 'em. That way you can be certain of having yourself a dead mouse, which is the only kind of mouse to have. That's some good philosophy, that is. Kill 'em even if it's already dead. And philosophy just means like a way of thinking about things. Hurry, shouted Cook, hurry! Despereaux lifted his head from the floor. The afternoon sun was shining through the large window. He had time to think how miraculous the light was, which means how beautiful and spectacular it was. And then it disappeared, and Meg's face loomed into view, which means it was kind of scary. She studied him, breathing. Little micey, she said, aren't you gonna skedaddle? Which means like run really quick or scurry. Despereaux looked for a long moment into Meg's small, concerned eyes, and then there came a blinding flash and the sound of metal moving through the air as Meg brought the kitchen knife down, down, down. Despereaux felt an intense pain. He leapt up into action. Reader, he scurried. He scurried like a professional mouse. He zigged to the left and he zigged to the right. Gore, shouted Meg. Missed him. Ain't that a surprise, said Cook just as Despereaux scurried under a crack in the pantry door. I got the little micey's tail, though, said Meg. She bent over and picked up Despereaux's tail and held it up, proudly displaying it to Cook. So, shouted Cook, what good will that do us when the rest of 'em has disappeared into the pantry? I don't know, said Meg, and she braced herself as Cook advanced upon her, intending to give her a good clap to the ear. I don't know. I'm kind of confused about that part. I'm not really sure what happened. So as a good reader, we stop, and we go back a little bit and we reread what we didn't understand. So I don't understand the part where there was a blinding flash and then Despereaux was hurt, so I'm going to reread that part again. Despereaux looked for a long moment into Meg's small and concerned eyes, and then there came a blinding flash and the sound of metal moving through the air. Okay, so the blinding flash and the metal, that's probably the knife. Okay. And then Despereaux felt a very intense pain, and he leapt up into action. Okay, so Despereaux got hurt, and then he jumped up and he started running. He scurried to the left and to the right, but Meg said that she missed him. And let's see, she bent over and picked up Despereaux's tail and held it up. Oh, okay, so the blinding light was the kitchen knife, and the pain that Despereaux felt was his tail getting cut off. Okay, I understand now. So now that I understood after rereading, then I can move on to the next page. Chapter 35, The Knight in Shining Armor. Despereaux was pondering the reverse of that question. He was wondering not what he could do with his tail, but what he would do without it. He was sitting on a bag of flour high on a shelf in the pantry, crying for what he had lost. The pain was intense, and he wept because of it. But he also cried because he was happy. He was out of the dungeon. He had been recalled to life. His rescue had happened just in time for him to save the Princess Pea from the terrible fate that the rat had planned for her. So Despereaux wept with joy and with pain and with gratitude. He wept with exhaustion, which means he was really tired, and despair and hope. He wept with all the emotions a young, small mouse who had been sent to his death and then been delivered from it in time to save his beloved can feel. Reader, the mouse wept. And then he lay down on the sack of flour and slept. Outside the castle, the sun set and the stars came out one by one. And then they disappeared and gave way to the rising sun, and Despereaux still slept. And while he slept, he dreamt. He dreamt of the stained glass windows and the dark of the dungeon. In Despereaux's dream, the light came to life, brilliant and glorious, in the shape of a knight swinging a sword. The knight fought the dark, and the dark took many shapes. First, the dark was his mother, and then the dark became his father. The dark was Furlough, wearing a black hood and shaking his head no. And then the dark became a huge rat, smiling a smile that was evil and sharp. The dark! Despereaux cried, turning his head to the left. The light! He murmured, turning his head to the right. He called out to the knight. He shouted, Who are you? Will you save me? But the knight did not answer him. Tell me who you are, Despereaux shouted. The knight stopped swinging his sword. He looked at Despereaux. "You know me," he said. "No," said Despereaux, "I don't." "You do," said the knight. He slowly took the armor off his head and revealed nothing. No one. The suit of armor was empty. "No, oh no," said Despereaux. "There's no knight in shining armor? It's all just make-believe? Like happily ever after?" And then in his sleep reader, the small mouse began to cry. That part was a little confusing to me too, so I'm going to stop and go back and reread the part that I was confused on. I'm confused on the whole light and dark thing, so let's see. So Despereaux slept, and while he slept, he dreamt. Okay, so he's having a dream. Let's see. In Despereaux's dream, the light came to life, brilliant and glorious, in the shape of a knight swinging a sword, and the knight fought the dark. Oh, okay, so he's dreaming about a knight in shining armor fighting off the darkness. Okay, that makes more sense. So now that I understand that Despereaux was just having a dream, I can keep reading. Chapter 36. What Mig Carried. And while the mouse slept, Roscoe put his terrible plan into effect. Would you like to hear how it all unfolded? The story's not a pretty one, but stories that are not pretty have a certain value too. Everything, as you well know, cannot always be sweetness and light. Listen, this is how it happened. First, the rat finished once and for all the job he had started long ago. He chewed through Gregory's rope, all the way through it, so that the jailer became lost in the maze of the dungeon. Late at night, when the castle was dark, the serving girl Mig climbed the stairs to the princess's room. In her hand, she carried a candle, and in the pockets of her apron were two very ominous things, which means kind of dark and scary things. In the right pocket, hidden in case they should encounter anyone on the stairs, was a rat with a spoon on his head and a cloak of red around his shoulders. So was Roscoe. In the left pocket was a kitchen knife, the same knife Mig Rousseau had used to cut off the tail of a certain mouse. These were the things, a rat, a knife, and a candle, that Mig carried with her as she climbed up the stairs. And we know better than to take the knives in our kitchen. We know that that's not okay. "Gore," she shouted to the rat. "It's dark, ain't it?" Yes, whispered Roscoe from her pocket. "It is quite dark, my dear." "When I'm princess," began Mig. "Shh," said Roscoe. "May I suggest that you keep your glorious plans for the future to yourself? And may I further suggest that you keep your voice down to a whisper? We are, after all, on a covert mission, which means like a secret mission." "Do you know how to whisper, my dear?" "I do," shouted Mig. "Then please," said Roscoe, "please, institute this knowledge immediately," which means he wants Mig to whisper. "Gore," whispered Mig. "All right." "Thank you," said Roscoe. "Do I need to review with you again our plan of action?" "I got it all straight here in my head," whispered Mig, and she tapped the side of her head with one finger. "How comforting," said Roscoe. "Perhaps, my dear, we should go over it again one more time just to be sure." "Well," said Mig, "we go into the princess's room, and she'll be sleeping and snoozing and snoring, and I'll wake her up and say, 'If you do not want to get hurt, you must come with me.'" "But you will not hurt her," said Roscoe. "No, I won't, because I want her to live so that she can be my lady-in-waiting when I become the princess." "Exactly," said Roscoe. "That will be her divine comeuppance." "Gore," whispered Mig. "Yes, her divine comeuppance." Mig, of course, had no idea what the phrase divine comeuppance meant, but she very much liked the sound of it, and she repeated it over and over to herself until Roscoe said, "And then?" "And then," continued Mig, "I tells her to get out of her princess bed and come with me on a little journey." "Ha!" said Roscoe. "A little journey, that's right. Ha! I love the understatement of that phrase. A little journey. Oh, it will be a little journey, indeed it will." "And then," said Mig, who was now coming to her favorite part of the plan, "we take her to the deep downs, and we give her some long lessons in how to be a serving girl, and we give me some short lessons on how to be a princess, and when we're all done studying up, we switch places, and I get to be the princess, and she gets to be the maid." I need to stop because I'm a little confused about their plan, so I need to go back and reread a little bit. Let's see. So they go into the princess's room and tell the princess to go with them, okay? And then they're going on a little journey down to the Deep Downs. And I know Mig calls the dungeon the Deep Downs. Okay, so they're going to wake the princess up and they're going to go to the dungeon. This is their plan. Okay? Then what happens? They're going to give the princess some long lessons in how to be a serving girl. And they're going to give Mig some short lessons in how to be a princess. And they're going to switch places and Mig gets to be the princess. Oh, okay, so I understand now. So they're going to take Princess P out of her bed, walk her down to the dungeon. They're going to teach Mig how to be the princess and Princess P how to be a servant. And then they're going to switch places. So now Mig's the princess and Princess P is the servant. Okay, so now that I understand, I can move on and keep reading. Reader, this is the very plan that Roscoe presented to Mig when he first met her. It, of course, was a ridiculous plan. No one would ever, not for one blind minute, mistake Mig for the princess or the princess for Mig, but Miggery-So, as I pointed out to you before, was not the sharpest knife in the drawer. And reader, too, she wanted so desperately to become a princess. She wanted, oh how she wanted, and it was because of this terrible wanting that she was able to believe in Roscoe's plan with every ounce of her heart. The rat's real plan was, in a way, more simple and more terrible. He intended, which means he is planning on, to take the princess to the deepest, darkest part of the dungeon. He intended to have Mig put chains on the princess's hands and her feet, and he intended to keep that glittering, glowing, laughing princess there in the dark forever. Ooh, that's not a very nice plan. Chapter 37, A Small Taste. She was asleep and dreaming of her mother, the queen, who was holding out a spoon to her and saying, "Taste this, my sweet pea, taste this, my darling, and tell me what you think." The princess leaned forward and sipped some soup from the spoon that her mother held out to her. "Oh, Mama," she said, "it's wonderful. It's the best soup I have ever eaten." "Yes," said the queen, "it is wonderful, isn't it? May I have some more?" said the Princess Pea. "I gave you a small taste so that you would not forget," said her mother. "I gave you a small taste so that you would remember. I want more." But as soon as the princess said this, her mother was gone. She disappeared, and the bowl and the soup spoon disappeared along with her. "Lost things," said the pea, "more lost things." And then she heard her name. She turned, happy, thinking that her mother had come back. But the voice was not her mother's. The voice belonged to somebody else, and it was coming from someplace far away, and it was telling her to wake up, wake up. The pea opened her eyes and saw Miggery-So standing over her bed. Wait, I'm a little confused, so I need to stop and go back and reread so I have the story right in my head. Okay, so Princess Pea was asleep and dreaming of her mother, okay, and she sipped some soup from the spoon her mother held out to her. Oh, okay, so the Princess Pea was dreaming about her mom feeding her some soup. Okay, and then she heard her name, but it was Miggery-So saying her name. Okay, now I can keep reading because I understand. The pea opened her eyes and saw Miggery-So standing over her bed. "Mig," she said. "Gor," said Mig softly. "Say it," commanded Roscoe. Mig closed her eyes and shouted, "If you does not want to get hurt, princess, you must come with me." "Whatever for?" said the princess in an annoyed tone. As I have noted before, the princess was not a person who was used to being told what to do. "What are you talking about?" Mig opened her eyes and shouted, "You've got to come with me, so after we take some lessons, you some long lessons and me some short ones together way down in the deep downs, I can be you and you can be me." "No!" shouted Roscoe from Mig's pocket. No, you're doing it wrong." "Who said that?" "Your Highness," said Roscoe, and he crawled out of Mig's pocket and made his way up to her shoulder and situated himself there, laying his tail across her neck to balance himself. "Your Highness," he said again, and he raised the spoon slowly off his head and smiled, displaying his mouthful of truly hideous teeth. I think it would be best if you do as Miggery suggests. She is, as you can quite clearly see, in possession of a knife, and she will, if pushed, use it. Oh, that would not be nice. This is ridiculous, the princess said. You can't threaten me. I'm a princess. We, said Roscoe, are all too aware of the fact of what you are. A knife, however, cares nothing for the fact that you are royalty. The pea looked at Mig. Mig smiled. The knife glinted in the light of the candle, which means it kind of shone, kind of sparkled. Mig, she said, her voice shaking the tiniest bit. I really do not think, said Roscoe, that Mig would need so much persuasion to use that knife, princess. She is a dangerous individual. But we are friends, said P. Aren't we, Mig? Eh? Said Mig. Trust me, said Roscoe, you are not friends, and I think it would be best if you addressed all your communications to me, princess. I am the one in charge here. Look at me. The pea looked directly at the rat and the spoon on his head. Her heart skipped one beat, and then two. Do you know me, princess? No, she said, lowering her head. I don't know you. But, reader, she did know him. He was the rat who had fallen in her mother's soup, and he was wearing her mother's spoon on his head. The princess kept her head down. She concentrated on containing the rage, which means the anger, that was leaping up inside of her. Look again, princess, or could you not bear to look? Does it pain your royal sensibilities to let your eyes rest on a rat? So Roscoe is asking P if it hurts her feelings to look at Roscoe. I don't know you, she said, and I'm not afraid to look at you. The pea raised her head slowly. Her eyes were defiant. She stared at the rat. Very well, said Roscoe. Have it your way. You do not know me. Nonetheless, you must do as I say, and my friend here, do as I say, and my friend here has a knife. So get out of bed, princess. We're going on a little journey. I would like it if you dressed in your loveliest gown, the one that you were wearing at a banquet not so long ago. And put on your crown, said Mig. Put that on your princess head. Yes, said Roscoe. Please, princess, do not forget your crown. The pea, still staring at Roscoe, pushed the covers back and got out of bed. Move quickly, said Roscoe. We must take our little journey while it is still dark and while the rest of the castle sleeps. The princess took a gown from her closet. Yes, said Roscoe to himself, that's the one, the very one. Look how it sparkles in the light. Lovely. I will need someone to do my buttons, said the princess as she stepped into the dress. Mig, you must help me. Little princess, said Roscoe, do you think that you can outsmart a rat, or our dear Miggery so? Let's see. Gore, said Mig, that's right. And so, while Mig held the knife pointed in the direction of the princess, the pea sat and let the rat crawl over her back, doing her buttons up for her one by one. The princess held very still. The only movement she allowed herself was this. She licked her lips over and over again, because she thought that she could taste there the sweet saltiness of the soup that her mother had fed her in her dream. I have not forgotten, Mamma, she had whispered. I have not forgotten you, and I have not forgotten soup. Chapter 38, To the Dungeon. The strange threesome made their way down the golden stairs of the castle. The princess and Mig walked side by side, and Roscoe hid himself again in the pocket of Mig's apron. And Mig pointed the sharp tip of the knife at the princess's back, and together they went down, down, down. That's not very nice. The princess was led to her fate as around her everyone slept. The king slept in his giant bed with his crown on his head and his hands crossed on his chest, dreaming that his wife, the queen, was a bird with green and gold feathers who called his name, Philip, Philip, Philip. Cook slept in a too small bed off the kitchen, dreaming of a recipe for soup that she could not find. Where did I put that? She mumbled in her sleep. Where did that recipe go? It was the queen's favorite soup. I must find it. And not far from Cook, in the pantry atop a bag of flour, slept the mouse Despereaux, dreaming, as you know, reader, of knights in shining armor, of darkness, and of light. And in the whole of the darkened, sleeping castle there was only the light of the candle in the hand of Megarissot. The candle shone on the princess's dress and made it sparkle, and the princess walked tall in the light and tried not to be afraid. In this story, reader, we have talked about the heart of the mouse and the heart of the rat and the heart of the servant girl, Megarissot, but we have not talked about the heart of the princess. Like most hearts, it was complicated, shaded with dark and dappled with light. The dark things in the princess's heart were these: a very, very small, hot, burning coal of hatred for the rat who was responsible for her mother's death. And the other darkness was a tremendous sorrow, a deep sadness, that her mother was gone, and that the princess could now only talk to her in her dreams. And what light in the princess's heart? Reader, I am pleased to tell you that the pea was a kind person, and perhaps more important, she was empathetic. Do you know what it means to be empathetic? I will tell you. It means that when you are being forcibly taken to a dungeon, when you're trying to be brave, you are able still to think for a moment of the person who is taking you there. You are able to think, "Oh, poor Mig, she wants to be a princess so bad and she thinks this is the only way. Poor, poor Mig. What must it be like to want something that desperately?" That, reader, is empathy. And now you have a small map of the princess's heart. Hatred, sorrow, kindness, and empathy. The heart she carried inside her as she went down the golden stairs and through the kitchen, and finally, just as the sky outside the castle began to lighten, down into the dark of the dungeon with the rat and the serving girl. And that is where we're going to leave off for today. So I hope you enjoyed this little section of the story and learned something about when it's important to stop and reread. I sent you guys a little chart that tells us when we think we should reread and how to think, I'm kind of confused about this part. I need to stop, go back, and reread what I just read to make sure I understand the story before moving on. And then I also sent you guys little bookmarks that if you're able to print at home, you can print those out and cut the bookmarks out and use them in the books that you're reading to remind you to reread when you're not understanding the story. So I hope you guys enjoyed the little section that we read today, and I'll see you guys later.